The Modi government is looking back at 9 years of being in power. One of the world's leading multinational investment banks, financial services company, Morgan Stanley, has come out with a report which looks at India's economic performance over the past decades and looks out into the future about where India could possibly get over the next 10 years. So we thought this is a good opportunity to invite Ridham Desai. He's the managing director of Morgan Stanley in India. To talk about the report that they've just put out. It's generating headlines because the report is titled How India Has Transformed in Less Than a Decade. This India is different from what it was in 2013. In a short span of 10 years, India has gained positions in the world order with significant positive consequences for the macro and market outlook. That's the broad thrust of the report. And I want to take our viewers through some of what Morgan Stanley estimates and Morgan Stanley Research is saying will happen in India over the next 10 years to give you a sense of why global economy trackers are so excited about the India story at this moment. So Ridham and his team at Morgan Stanley estimate that India's GDP in dollar billions will, from financial year 22, where it stands at $3.1 trillion, in financial year 2032, so in about 10 years from now, go up to $7.9 trillion. The GDP per capita, that is currently at $2,278, in the next 10 decades, Morgan Stanley estimates could go up to $5,242. India's share of world exports as a percentage, which in December 2021 stood at 2.2, estimated to go up by 2031 to 4.5% of global exports. The size of India's retail market, which is very important for the way global companies look at the India story, estimated to go up from $781 billion in 2021 to $1,834 billion by December 2031. The size of India's equity markets, which currently stands at $3,500 billion, estimated to go up to $10,000 billion by the end of the decade. Similarly, India's IT services being exported, which currently stands at $178 billion, estimated to go up to $527 billion. Ridham, my first question, looking at the estimates that you've put out, now those in opposition or those who are skeptical about the India story would say, so what? Growth is a constant part of the story of a developing country like India, and India would continue to grow. What is it that you're picking up about where India is, where India has come over the past decade, and looking out into the future, which makes you think that the next 10 years could indeed be India's years? Ridham.
Hey, thanks, Rahul. So I think a lot has changed in the last 10 years. If you go back to 2013, the then Fed Reserve Chairman just uttered the word taper, and the Indian currency was down 20%. India is no longer as vulnerable on macro as it used to be. So we have achieved great amount of stability. This is not something that common people on the street will automatically realize. But the rupee actually, even though on a headline basis seems to be depreciating, has actually been amongst the better performing currencies in the world. What it has done essentially is it has fallen less than what other currencies have done against the dollar. So bulk of this is because the dollar is rising. So that's one part of the story, which is that we've had macro stability. How the common man on the street feels is inflation. I mean, look at what's happened in the last 2 years for the world at large. We've had inflation levels which we have not seen before. India went through a modest inflation cycle, but that was about it. And the prime reason for this is that this current administration led by the Prime Minister, and I would characterize the Prime Minister as an inflation hawk. I think when he came into office in 2014, one of the top agendas that he took was let's fix inflation. And he did a series of things to protect the country from inflation. And for a poor country, especially, even for large countries, inflation is the worst news that you can get. It actually just it extracts your ability to live in a decent way. So we have changed that. I think we've put a lot of infrastructure on the ground in most sectors. Between 2014 and today, we've added more infrastructure than we did in the previous 6 decades. So whether it's road, railways, airports, there's been enormous amount of investments that has been made. And then we've made some seminal changes to laws. I'll highlight three of them. For example, GST. Now, in the beginning, it seemed all very messy, but as things have settled down and 5 years have passed, GST is proving to be a big boost to the economy. We changed the Real Estate Regulation Act. This means that the way consumers interact with builders has changed, and you can see that in property demand. We changed the bankruptcy code. In the past, in this country, you could go bankrupt and just walk away. Now you can't. And so, there have been all these changes which make us fairly optimistic about how India stands going into the next 10 years.